Hello, everyone. Welcome to Asha's World. Today we have a very special guest. We have Ramaa Krishnan. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. Now, the first question is the toughest, and it will get easier afterwards. How would you briefly describe yourself? What would you say to our audience here? How would you briefly describe yourself in any way you see
Wow.
fit?
Oh my God. It is a tough question because so many selves show up when you ask that question saying, describe me, describe me. So,
Feel free
so
to
I
correct
would,
as we go along. It's like, oh yeah, I'm also this, I'm also that.
yes,
Right?
exactly. Exactly. But in general, I would just say that I would think I'm a very introspective, introverted, deeply philosophical, emotional thinker, teacher. I started a center called Bloomed Lotus Center for Self-Awareness, and I have been doing this. This is my 25th year. I like to teach people to meditate, to reflect deeply, and to live their life more intentionally.
Wonderful. That's great. So, your book, your new book is The Yoga of Self-Love, The Sacred Path to Wholeness and Healing Through Inner Child Work. Now, I generally judge a book by its title, and there's so many things of it that I very much like, and especially self-love. I think that is so important and so much lacking in the world. And we have misconceptions of it too, and so on. So, what would we briefly say about self-love?
So you're absolutely right. It's very much needed in this world. And I think we don't realize that we have to start loving ourselves before we ask others to love us. You know, how can anyone do for you what you cannot do for yourself? So it starts with ourselves. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I would like to point out is that we think, oh, I can just love myself. I do, but is it here or is it in your entire heart? Is it in your body? How do you feel when someone says something nasty about you? How do you feel when you yourself screw up, make a mistake? So when we talk about love, loving another person, or just love, it's so much more than just appreciating one's strengths and saying, oh, I'm good at this or that. It's loving the entire package that is who you are. That's the thing. The third point is that such kind of love, the reason I called the book The Yoga of Self-Love is because just like, any yoga that is normally understood to be on the mat where you get up and you practice yoga, you go to your yoga class, you never say, "Oh, I did yoga. I'm done with it." It's a practice that lasts as long as you're alive. So I feel that I believe that self-love is also a practice because I might have loved the version who showed up yesterday, but today I might get up and something in the morning might trigger me off, and there's a whole new version to start loving all over again. So it's a practice.
Yes, yes. And so there are actually two words to it too. You have the self and the love. And so love itself, it's maybe a bit clearer, but what's the self? And how do you connect with that? And I like how you also said there's so many roles and different versions and different people and different roles we play in our lives. And so we show up differently in each of those. And so we need to also discover ourselves. And you started off by talking about being introspective, reflective, a thinker, emotional. That's all me too. So that's something that we
High
have in common.
five.
Yeah, high five. And so, but what would you recommend here? Because I think really the self is kind of the issue. When you don't know yourself, then you can't really love yourself, right? So they're really connected in intricate ways.
Yes. So true. So, from a very spiritual angle, I can say we are all divine and our deepest self is divine. So we know that, okay? But when I'm talking about this self, it's the human self, you see? And this human self, when we start to look at it, there are some traits that are probably at the core of who we are as a human being. And though our roles might differ, probably across all those roles, across all the ups and downs of our life, there are some common threads. There are some common strengths, there are some common weaknesses. And what I found in the course of my journey, which is what the book is about, is that basic self we get in touch with, or we lose touch with, depending on our situation, when we are children. You see, that basic self has not really changed, but because of life, conditioning, experiences, somewhere a lot of that basic self gets lost in translation into adulthood. You see, and to truly love ourselves is to go back and retrieve all those parts of us that we have lost, to be able, and it's not just to love blindly and say, for example, if I might discover that, actually I tend to get too attached to people too fast. Now, I have to love that self does not mean that I do not monitor it, have some accountability, take some wisdom teachings and teach myself how to love in a more healthy way. You see, so love is not just feeling, it's also seeing. It's not just loving and seeing, it is also taking accountability and protecting and showing up in the world in a way that our light shines brightly for ourselves and others.
Yeah, one of your other parts of your title is healing. And I think really healing, to achieve that, you need to work with the inner child. I'm completely on board with that, 100%. And I think because we don't face that, we don't look back, we don't look to our childhood, which was such an important part of our lives that shaped us. Because we don't deal with those issues, we continue. And I see it like we're kind of like zombies because we're not really conscious of it, and we go along, and then relationships don't work out. We're not happy. We're not satisfied with who we are and how we present ourselves. But once we really get to those core issues, it's quite liberating.
I believe that entirely, 100%. It is liberating, but it is a freedom that comes with personal responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
You see? So now I'm not operating from self-control of, I hope people don't see who I really am, but it's an accountability to oneself. And so it's that, someone once coined this phrase, wings of freedom and roots of responsibility.
I like that.
So that's the yoga, that's the yoga. Because when you look at yoga traditionally, when we even go to a yoga class, or you're practicing yoga, if you notice that we are doing two things. We are working with our body, which, we say, sit up tall, right? You sit up tall, lift your chin, lift your shoulders, but you also kind of focus on the feet, and you say, stay grounded, let your feet be pulled down by gravity. So there is an upward motion, there's a downward motion, and both are happening simultaneously in yoga. And so it is with self-love. On one hand, I want to inspire myself, but on the other hand, I also have to say, take it easy. You've got to have patience. You have to understand that you can't do everything. You have so many imperfections that you've got to embrace, and limitations that you just can't change.
Yeah, and that's interesting because as I was looking through your book too, we say you talk about midlife crisis, and which is something that again I can relate to, and it gets stronger, and it seems kind of natural that it comes also with age, where you ask yourself these existential questions. And for me, it's also the additional experience of the pandemic. I think it also like added to it and
Yes.
made it even stronger. And so, but you have to walk through the mud, you have to walk through the tunnel. It's very uncomfortable. There's a lot of things that kind of bubble up, but it's really important to hang in there and to keep going.
I would agree. I would agree. And what I have done over the years, as I told you, it's my 25th year of teaching. And as I began to understand how to do it, I began to teach this to people. And if you've noticed in my book, at the end of every chapter, in addition to my own story, I give the steps for the reader so that they can say, I mean, it's almost like me saying, this is how I did it, and here are things that you could do. So we have to walk this journey, and we have to know we are not alone.
Yes. But it's necessary because that's where we get our learning from as
Yes.
well. So you don't want to miss out on it because that's again that's a goal there, but you do have to work for it. It's hard, it's difficult, it takes a lot of time, patience,
Yes.
as you're saying, but it's so worth it once we actually engage with this.
Yeah. And Arash, you're absolutely right. The whole world needs to do this
Mhm,
because just see how much of our aspirations from others, our expectations from others
mhm,
are basically because we have got some needs that have not been met.
mhm, mhm.
And, I always give the example of going grocery shopping on an empty stomach.
Oh yeah,
you know
yeah,
you will buy things you don't need. You will get all kinds of unnecessary drama if you
yeah,
don't first take care of yourself and then go grocery shopping.
yes. But it seems people are just like not comfortable with discomfort, right? So we have this like whatever it is, we have could be even like a relationship, could be a job, could be like you just don't want to step out of that. But that is so important. And the fear, yes, we're afraid of it, but it's there's so much once we go through it, it's actually not as bad as we expected it to be in many cases.
Yes, I agree with you. There
Yeah.
will be some surprises and some disappointments.
Yeah.
It's not all just only downhill. There are also some unbelievable. And I do believe that as we continue on the practice and get used to, okay, today I'm going to dig this up and this is what I'm going to look at. In the midst of that, I think it was Carl Jung who said, and I think there's a quote I put in the book, I can't remember right away, but in the midst of all of that, you will find some treasures.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and that's becoming whole again. The idea of like really finding yourself, because it's not really what happens to you, but how you deal with these situations. And that's something I've looked at too. When I look back to my life, and it's like I probably would have made the same decisions. I would have felt differently about it. I would have probably been more relaxed about it. I probably would have said, good job under the circumstances. This was the best that I could do. And why hit myself over the head over something or regret things? I think that's when that brings us down, that negativity. But always look at the bright side of things, the positive side, because it's there. Even though we don't perceive it, there's always there that light.
You're so right. And part of the work that we have to do with healing the inner child is to look back at the same stories because
Hmm.
we can't change the stories. We can't change what happened to us. We can't change the mistakes we've made. But the wound doesn't come from what happens as much as it comes from the interpretations around it,
Yes.
the blame, the shame, the
Yes.
regret. And the work might not be that you're going to change that, but just to go and have, like you just said, why can't I just be relaxed about, yeah, you know what, you screwed that one up. And, but you also learned a few lessons there, and that's how you grow.
Yes, and taking responsibility for that too, because I find if I take responsibility for something, then I can change it. But if I
Yes,
don't take responsibility for it, then I'm a victim and I can't do anything. I'm helpless in that
yes,
sense.
so true. And, for me, when for years I thought I was taking responsibility, but what I didn't realize was that what I was really taking was shame and guilt.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's the important difference between taking responsibility
Mhm.
in a way that has self-compassion
Mhm.
and taking responsibility in a way that's shaming oneself.
Yeah.
And therein lies the difference. One allows you to grow and one stores the pain.
Yes, yes, yeah, and but the also what I practice is here mindfulness, which is a type of I said what you talk about
It
yoga
is.
is like completely relate to that. It's
Yeah.
it's constant. Right? This is
Yes.
24/7, right? And when people also when they're religious and they say they go to church on Sundays and to sermon and that's it. No, this has to continue for the. This is just maybe a snapshot of something or a practice, but you got to continue for the rest of the day And that is constant, that kind of awareness, self-awareness of realizing, oh, I'm responding to this in anger or in fear and so on. And then we have the chance of like stepping over that and overcoming it and growing from all of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's that um, going to church or temple or wherever it is one goes to pray and coming into, as we mature, beginning to realize that faith is not a place to go to, but a place to come from,
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
you know? So, yeah, moment to moment, it really is a moment to moment exercise.
Mhm. Yeah. And in that moment we have everything. We have the past, we have the inner child, we have the present and the future self. So they're all combined. And when people talk about the present, I think it's much more than that. It's like the endless possibilities of the moment, the potentials that could happen in your life, that you could choose, the path that you can take, and so on. It's really in that one moment that sets the stage for the rest of your future and your world and
Yes.
experience of the world.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that I mention in the book is how, for so many of us, in addition to the inner child and the imperfect inner child and the inner adult who's trying to make sense of the past, present, and future, now, what we have inside of us, for, many of us, is the inner critic, the inner critic. And for me, for years, I had this inner critic, but I thought that this is how I have to hold myself to be accountable. You see, I
Mhm.
almost thought of that inner critic as the voice of God. People would say
Yeah,
that's the voice of my conscience.
yeah.
And then peeling it out and saying, that's not the God I want
Mhm,
living in me. I
mhm.
want a God who says, come, you made another mistake. Let's figure this out.
Yeah.
Let's see how we can learn and go and, create something from this. So when we have the third voice between our inner, perfect inner human being and the ego that's trying to show itself up in the world outside, when we have that third mediating voice as the voice of a God who is loving, forgiving, and present and never giving up on us,
Mhm,
um, then how we translate all of this becomes very, very different. And that is, part of this healing the inner child is uncovering how we have unconsciously, many of us, imbibed by osmosis fear and thought that it was faith.
mhm, mhm. Yes, yes. And with the fear is also the fear of failure, the fear of punishment, that bad things going to happen, and that we're responsible for the bad things that happen to us, and so on. So all this gets accumulates. But
Yes.
one thing I find fascinating too is the idea of karma and destiny and fate,
Yes.
because that's something where you're the on one side, yes, we're free, but maybe on another side we're not, and that's something I'm trying to get to grips with as well.
Yeah.
That path, maybe.
Yeah. Here's how I would, chime in into that debate. You know, and so that I think that again, the law of karma,
Mhm,
clearly, for me, when I see the same idea echoed in different faith traditions, I
mhm,
believe it's a truism. So you see that, you have it in the Hindu tradition. You have the Bible saying what goes around comes around.
mhm,
You have it in Buddhism. So you see, okay, so now that it's fine. But then what has happened is that it's been once again hijacked by religion in a way that it's become something that you're supposed to just suffer. I remember as a teenager, I was going through some difficult things, and my grandmother was visiting, and I was struggling with this thing and telling her. And she said, that's your karma. You've done, who knows what you've done in your past life, and now you've got to just suffer it. So I hated the word karma for such a long time,
good reason. Yeah. Yeah.
for good reason. And again, in the course of all of these uncovering, I began to see, and I think I mentioned in the book, a quote that really helped me came from Pema Chodron, the great mindfulness teacher, where she says, karma is your life giving you all the lessons you need to learn to open up some more.
Okay. Yes.
So she takes it out of the realm of punishment and reward and all of that. But she says that, the energy you've put out is coming back to you. And now it's not meant to punish you, but to give you an opportunity. What are you going to do about this? Are you going to shut down? Are you going to open up some more?
That's right. Yeah.
So that has helped. So things that happen, and of course, things are happening every day in our life, and keeping that in mind. And there's another teacher whose work I have been very inspired by. He was from India, and his name was Ramana Maharishi. So Ramana Maharishi was a very spiritually advanced master. And someone asked him the same question, fate and free will, what's the connection?
Yes.
And he gave such a succinct response. He said, fate is what happens to you. Free will is what you choose to do with it. Done.
Yeah. That's good.
Let's not go down the rabbit hole here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, another one that I've seen that I quite liked is it's like a page. On one side, it's blank where you write, but the other side is already written. And so it's kind of the combination of both because it's like both are on the same page, but you won't always get what you want, but for good reason again, because that's not in the intention of things and that's beyond our control as well. The idea of like we're in absolute control, no, that's not the key. And that's a good thing that we're not in absolute control.
And you're saying for good reason,
Yeah.
and that those words tell me that you trust the plan, even when it doesn't work the way you would like it to, right? Now, for many of us in childhood, when we have major setbacks, childhood, youth, whatever, that trust is broken. You see, that trust is broken, leaving us deeply pessimistic for a very long time. And it accumulates over a lifetime. And that's why in midlife, you see so many people having breakdowns and all kinds of things because the lack of trust, which was broken in early life, accumulated a whole bucket full of pessimism that has reached critical mass. And our only choice now is either to continue down this trajectory, which is going to create all kinds of unhappy situations, ill health, and all of that, or to say, stop. When was my trust broken? Was it because of what happened to me, or was it because of the story I told myself about it?
Yes.
And that is healing.
Yes. For me, it's actually doubt because I know that the idea is if the universe and God or any divinity
Whatever.
you want to say, whatever you want to say, if that's loving, then it wants the best for you, for each of us, right? So that's the idea. And that trust is sometimes there, but then sometimes there are moments like, what if this is not the case? What if I'm just making it up? What if it's part of my imagination?
Yes.
But then what brings me back on is certain feelings, certain things that come through clarity, certain experiences that I have that are that beyond logic. There's no explanation for it. And so that brings me back on the path, like, no, yeah, this is the right path, right? And that brings me back to the trust. But it's a lot of work too, working through
it is
self.
a lot of work.
Yes.
It's a lot of work. You're absolutely right. And I love what you just said. And even for me, when I have these incredible synchronistic things happen, so I know exactly what you mean. I'm just like, I can't even talk about this to anyone. No one will believe this, So I just know there's something bigger that's happening.
Yes.
But then my smaller ego, right? My ego. So I might think this is really good for me, but for the ego, we are wired. The teachings tell us we are wired to pursue pleasure, avoid pain. And we are wired that way. So when we have a painful experience that we are wired to avoid, to trust the bitter medicine is very hard.
Yes. Yes. And also when it's because the path is long, right? It takes a long time to fit together. Then at some point you're like, well, this hasn't happened yet. What's going on? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm the wrong path. But often that's when you have to persist the more. And so one example I like to give is for the Beatles. When they were in Hamburg and things didn't work out, they just said, we're going to hang in there because we believe in it. This something is going to happen. But I'm wondering, what if they had stopped and they said, you know what? Let's just give up. This is not working out. Music is not our thing. We would have lost a lot, and so would they have as
So
well, everyone.
true.
So it's really that kind of, and again, it goes back to me what I think is intuition. If your intuition deep inside tells you this is the right path, this is the right choice, stick with it because it will fall into place. But you do have to be patient along the way.
So true. In the book, I talk about the concept of dharma,
Dharma, yeah.
dharma, which is a very Eastern concept. And I share how I came across the Bhagavad Gita, which
Mhm.
is like the Bible to the Hindus. And there was a line in the Gita that it's right in the first few chapters of the book that completely changed my life because I came across these two lines that say, better to do your own dharma imperfectly than to do someone else's perfectly,
Right. Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
what is dharma? It's what you were just talking about, that which you feel is the truth. You feel it in your soul, you feel it in your body, but it requires a certain kind of paying us attention in a certain kind of way to be able to recognize it and to discern that from, oh, my friend is doing this. I also want to do that,
Yeah. Or this pays more. This is better. This is more
Yeah.
lucrative, right? Things that are actually not important at all in
Yeah.
the
So
scheme.
that discernment of I hear what you're saying, and I'm part of me is very tempted, but this is how I feel in my body. That's the work we are talking about.
Yes. Yes. It's kind of an embodied thing too, because it's in the body, but it's also the mind, it's also the soul, and everything kind of aligns in that sense. But going
Yeah.
back to childhood, I think a lot of us, and myself included, we have this dream as children because we have this idea, we have a better connection with what you're saying, the Dharma here, and then we lose it because
Yes.
we listen to our parents like, oh, that won't pay you. You want to become a writer? That doesn't work out. Find something else.
Exactly.
And so but it's kind of reconnecting with that. So the inner child is, yes, there's a lot of like bad experiences, or even trauma, I would call it. But then
Yeah.
there's also a clarity that we had. And I think really getting in
Yes.
touch with that too, because that's
Yes.
again another side of our childhood.
I absolutely, that's exactly the point. The inner child is the one, is the name. It's just a name, but
Mhm.
basically it is our original self. You see,
Right.
our original self. But that original self, sometimes it doesn't always cause us pleasurable experiences.
Mhm.
It has, so then what happens is that, like you said, oh, why do you want to be a writer? There's no money in it and things like that. And
Yeah.
so we veer away from our original self. But inner child work is going back. And at the same time, we can't completely throw away the, inner adult who says, well, you do need to make money. It is
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
so those the work that is there is uncovering and then really doing a lot of negotiations within us so that we are able to integrate that and move forward.
Mhm. Yeah, integrating, that's very important. So they're not just separate parts that exist there, but
Yeah.
combining it. Yes.
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
can't go from, oh, just going to be a writer now. And, it's no, it is part three is integrating the two parts of us,
Mhm.
the worldly part of us and the soulful part of us.
Mhm. And we need both. We need
We
both.
need both.
Yes, absolutely.
We need both.
One thing I'd like to ask about is also when we talk about the self and the idea of reincarnation of past lives. This is something that I've looked at recently. My last podcast was about that too, and exploring that. And what I found personally by trying to explore that and what I think was a past life, that many of the things that happened in the past life are clearly connected with the present life, except in a different form. But it's still the theme, the story is still the same. It's continuing. And it's like sometimes maybe getting a second chance, sometimes maybe being able to push further. What's your sense about that?
Yeah, so true. So, in past lives, let us say we have some unfinished business, some
Mhm.
lessons to be learned, and things like that. Then we start off this life from that point. So there are a couple of things I would like to share with you. One is, of course, the Gita, because in the
Mhm.
Gita itself, there's a place where the words are that, depending on where you are at the moment of your death, that means, let's say this academic year is over, and based on how much progress you have made, we will place you in fifth grade or sixth grade or so not as a reward, but you will be in the next birth given accordingly an opportunity to continue from where you left off. So
Mhm.
that's the Gita.
Right.
The Gita actually says that. Then, in addition to that, I have mentioned the work of an author whose work I was very impressed by, and his name is Robert Schwartz, who has written a series of books. One of them is Your Soul's Plan, and that was the book that I read. That was echoing the message of the Gita, where Robert Schwartz talks to different psychics who talk to people between lifetimes, and these psychics are able to go between lifetimes and say why you chose this lifetime and these struggles and how it was connected to completing a project that you started some lifetimes ago.
Uh-huh.
So that
Yeah.
book is very, very interesting, where we really begin to see our life as an opportunity to cultivate qualities that we might need to cultivate. I definitely know that from my life and my experiences, this is my lifetime for cultivating compassion, cultivating patience, because I know that I didn't have this in my, early childhood experiences and environment.
Mhm.
And okay, life experiences. So I'm looking at my inner child who's like, always give me things now,
Mhm.
and I'm
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
to my inner child and saying, darling, this is something we have decided we are going to learn in this lifetime. So let it take its own time. We're just going to wait and trust.
Mhm.
So I do think they are connected, but not in a way of punishment, but in a way of learning and growth. And of course, sometimes it might be to improve upon something. You look at people who are so talented, they have already worked on this in their previous
Yes.
lifetimes.
Yes. They have a head start from previous.
They have a head
Yeah.
start. So yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes I'm envious, but of course I
Yeah.
have to work on my envy in this lifetime.
Yeah. But then, it takes away the fear of death because that's something that a lot of us have. And then
Exactly,
you're
right.
living with that burden. But what if it's not a burden? And people who had near-death experiences, they say it's like this warm feeling, this like
I
flowing
know.
feeling of love and so on. So it's like, what are we so scared about? And if again we believe in fate, it's gonna happen when it's gonna happen at the moment it's expected to happen. So let's just again relax, like going back to my past self and say, okay, let's just relax and enjoy the ride as much as we can.
Right. So it's so true. So true. And I think that again, this fear of God has been put in by people misinterpreting religion and karma, and you're going to burn in hell and all that nonsense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So who wants to die with all that being told,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I think that when I think of karma is your life giving you all the experiences, you need to learn to open up. I ask myself, you know, can I open up at the time of death?
Mhm, mhm,
Instead of shutting down in fear, can I open up? So
mhm,
these are all like, again, I do talk to my inner child and tell her, one day we're going to die, and I would like to see how you can open up. And we'll practice that now when, when we face failure, when we face rejection, when we face disappointment. Let's start practicing.
mhm.
Whatever feels like death to us right now, let us see if we can open up instead of shutting down.
And speaking of open up, I like the name of your organization, Full Bloomed Lotus Center for Self-Awareness. What does it mean to you, and how did you come up with the name? And I think I have an idea, but what would you say? What does it represent to you? How did you come up with that specific name?
I came up with it quite in meditation. When I had been trying to find a name for my work. I was already teaching meditation, and we were doing this from my home. And then I decided to move it to a studio and incorporate myself, but I just couldn't think of a name. And one day in meditation, I just saw this lotus rising,
Mm.
and I thought about it. But but of course, the lotus is a symbol for, rising from all the muck at the
Right.
bottom of the lake and rising towards the light.
Yeah,
So it's a raising of consciousness, right?
yeah,
So that's what I thought that Full Bloom Lotus would be. It would be a place where we would raise consciousness,
yeah. It's
like the
for and
lotus,
through self-awareness. That's what it comes
self-awareness.
into it blossoms, it comes into being. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Ramaa Krishnan. Just to remind everyone, your book is The Yoga of Self-Love, The Sacred Path, and sacred, that's important, The Sacred Path to Wholeness and Healing Through Inner Child Work. Thank you so much for being on Rashes. What's such a pleasure talking to you.
Same here. Thank you for the opportunity. Really enjoyed talking to you, Arish.